Hi, my name is Tom Van Hoof, and I'm a faculty member at the University of Connecticut. I am pleased to be presenting a study completed by an interprofessional team of researchers. Collectively, the team possessed expertise in education, nursing, medicine, and library science. The study was supported in part by a grant from the National League for Nursing, but the views expressed in this presentation are entirely my own. Nursing Education Perspectives has recently published the findings of our study. The study's aim was to determine the research status of retrieval practice as a strategy to improve teaching and learning in nursing education. The study's research question was, what is the extent, range, and nature of original research about retrieval practice in nursing education? As you know, a variety of options exist for conducting reviews of published information. One increasingly common approach is the scoping review, also called a scoping study. A scoping review is an appropriate strategy when the status of research in a particular area is unclear. Scoping reviews provide a map to understand and to guide additional research, such as where the field has been and whether a clear path forward for research exists. Scoping reviews can be a precursor to other studies, such as an experimental study, and even to another review, such as a systematic review. One limitation of a scoping review is that it does not assess the quality of the evidence. It only describes what research currently exists. The team determined that a scoping review was an appropriate mechanism to study retrieval practice, as there appeared to be no published reviews on the subject, but only published studies reflecting different methodologies. We wanted to learn more in order to build on what's been published. The science of learning, or learning science, is an emerging interdisciplinary field that concerns itself with how the brain learns and remembers important information, such as knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors. Drawing from the fields of cognitive psychology, educational psychology, and neuroscience, among other fields, learning science offers nearly a century of research in support of retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is a strategy that requires the learner to examine their long-term memory for information previously studied before interacting with the same information again in a new study or practice session. The act of retrieval, even if incomplete or inaccurate, strengthens the neural network that represents the information and prepares the network for modifications that strengthen mastery and memory. While one can learn from high-stakes tests, one should consider retrieval practice as a strategy to learn rather than as a mechanism for judgment. As such, retrieval practice is better conceived as a no-stakes or low-stakes exercise. Rather than review what one has learned through a passive means, such as rereading or re-listening, retrieval practice is an active strategy that starts with what the learner has tried to learn previously. Retrieval practice provides feedback to the learner, feedback that can direct or guide ongoing study efforts. Many synonyms exist for retrieval practice, and its benefits are also referred to as the testing effect. Teachers and learners alike can use the strategy. Ideally, based on priority information, teachers will offer practice questions in class and for homework, and students will develop questions with which to quiz themselves. Informed by recommendations and an interprofessional experience, Arksey and O'Malley's scoping review framework guided this study. The team utilized the PRISM extension for scoping reviews as described by Tricco and colleagues to report the findings. The inclusion criteria were 1. Original research reflecting quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods designs. 2. Intervention involving nursing education at any level, whether it be pre-licensure, graduate, or continuing education. 3. An intervention including retrieval practice by any term or description, and either as a single intervention or as part of a multifaceted strategy. 4. A peer-reviewed publication. 5, an article published within the search time frame of January 1, 2000 through August 31st, 2021. And 6, an article available in English. Database review of PubMed, CINAHL, Scopus, PsycInfo, and ERIC, and hand searching yielded 1,985 titles. After removing duplicates, the team screened 1,966 titles and abstracts and completed full-text assessments of 55 articles. These efforts led to 25 articles being included. Although only documented 76% of the time, the location of most participants was the US and the UK, although the inclusion of English language articles only is a bias in favor of English-speaking countries. Most publications came in the latter half of the publishing time frame. Quantitative study designs were most common, followed by mixed, then qualitative. Nearly all studies reflected the pre-licensure education level, with only one at the continuing education level and none at the graduate level. Studies mostly measured one outcome, with specific outcomes including test performance, learning perceptions, and/or pass rates. The outcomes were not mutually exclusive, so the percentages add to greater than 100. Of the 25 included studies, 64% used one or more explicit terms to refer to the retrieval practice intervention. Across the studies, the term noted 22 distinct terms, with only 2, practice and practice questions, appearing twice. Ranging from a low of 56% and a high of 100%, variation existed in the documentation of important characteristics of retrieval practice within included studies. The type of retrieval involved was documented 100% of the time, with multiple choice questions being most common. The format was documented 76% of the time, with the virtual format being most common. The testing medium was documented 96% of the time, with written tests being most common. Whether there was stakes involved or not was documented 100% of the time, and the more common stake was graded or required. Whether answers to questions were available or not, this was documented 56% of the time, and more often than not, answers were provided. Whether explanations or feedback were provided was documented 84% of the time, with the vast majority of the time explanations and feedback was provided. The type of learning was documented 64% of the time. Whether something was immediately recalled, that is within a day of testing, retained, so it was available to the learner one or more days after the activity, and whether it was transferred to a new or more complex situation at any time. There was documentation about the type of learning measured 64% of the time. Many more studies, about 84%, occurred in the second decade of the time frame than the first, and compared to a recent scoping review of distributed practice and research of nursing education, yielded only about half of the studies. Distributed practice and retrieval practice are the two most evidence-based strategies of learning science. Quantitative designs were most common at 64%, followed by mixed methods at 28% and qualitative at 8%. More mixed and qualitative approaches would be helpful in understanding participants' attitudes toward and experiences with retrieval practice. While helpful at the pre-licensure level, research at the graduate and continuing education levels is also important, as the strategy is relevant to all levels of education. Over 1/3 of the articles failed to label the intervention as retrieval practice, and they often used unique terms. Only 2 terms, practice and practice questions, appeared in more than one study. And across studies, authors used 22 distinct terms for retrieval practice. Authors need to be aware of supporting research for the strategy, to use it as recommended, and to label retrieval practice interventions using conventional terminology. Consistent documentation of key characteristics is essential to make progress using retrieval practice in nursing education. Thank you for your interest and attention. I welcome any questions, and below please find my contact information.